first of all, I was muted. I couldn't defend myself through those accolades, but that was highly exaggerated, but greatly appreciated. Hi, everyone. Really, really nice to sort of bring this back. I'm Azariah HaCohen. I had the esteemed privilege of learning with some of you. I can't see everyone who's on. This is my first Zoom call, by the way. I know that's probably unusual in this day and age. So it's nice to be here in the 21st century with everyone. And I can't really see everyone who's here, but yeah, Beit Midrash is an amazing place. I had tremendous privilege of learning there with some of you. Oh, hey, okay, cool. Some more faces, fun. I think everyone controls their own mic, right? Everyone can like turn on their mic whenever they want. That's
correct.
I don't know. Okay, cool, great.
Everyone is muted in general, but people can speak up when they want.
Got it. Okay, cool. Okay. Exciting. So usually, I mean, in the Beit Midrash, I usually ran things sort of Chabura style, so I'm definitely down to do that. It seems like we have a manageable number of people here too, which is really fun. So I don't know if everyone wants to, we could like, maybe I'll call out a name based on like what it says and just like introduce yourself, what year maybe you were involved in Beit Midrash, really briefly or not, or just who you are, where you're from, and just so we can kind of bring this together. Also, one of the unique things about the Beit Midrash, sorry, before we do that icebreaker situation, is that, and you guys, those of you who've learned there know this, that the Beit Midrash is really a cool place where it brings people together from all over the world and with every kind of background. And that's really cool, especially when you're learning together, because really everyone always has something to contribute from where they're coming from and where their life and their life experience has room to shed light. So I think that's really cool. And if we can recreate that on Zoom now, that'd be amazing. So without further ado, Andrew, you want to kick that off?
Yeah, sure. I'm Andrew. I guess I'll put a video on for this, whatever. Make it a little more personal. I'm Andrew. I am from New York. I'm in Jerusalem right now, and I don't know. I loved Yonatan Nudrin's situation in Hebrew University when I was there, like maybe 2 years ago at this point. And I've trying to be connected to his awesomeness since, even though if it's sparse. But yeah, big fan.
Cool. Okay. Let's see. Has next on the list. Dahlia, you wanna?
Sure. Okay. Hi, I'm Dahlia. I'm from Toronto. I was at Hebrew last semester in the fall, and I'm also in the Rabbi Yonatan fan club. So that's what
all right. Pixel 3. Someone, whoever Pixel 3 is. Is that no? Oh, I'm not sure who.
It's your mom.
Oh, hi, Emma. How's it going? Welcome. This is so funny.
I'm in New York, and I don't often get a chance to actually see you and talk to you, but sure. Let's hear what you've been up to, buddy.
We just spoke before. I'm kidding.
Okay.
I'm a huge fan of Azariah.
My God. I can't believe this is happening.
You have to know, you did something amazing.
Yeah, okay. Well,
I
happen to be an Azariah groupie also, but I'm going to go on mute now.
All right.
Okay.
I knew that your mom knows how to use it better than you do.
You're not wrong. You're not wrong, and I'm not surprised either. All right, that was an unexpected surprise. Thank you, Emma. And welcome. No, I want to take over. No.
Are we introducing ourselves?
Yeah, go for it.
Okay. I studied at Hebrew University in the fall with Rabbi Yudrin in the Hillel, and Azariah, you actually led me through the desert like 5 years back. And I just remember being in the desert with you, and you were like in charge of everybody, so I thought that was cool. I'm like Machach Bars, I think.
Machach, yeah. No, I remember.
I recognize you. Yeah. That's all.
Hilarious. Well, welcome. Are you in the Beit Midrash now? Were you in what's
No,
your
I'm
link to
home
RG?
in Teaneck, New Jersey.
Cool. Amazing. Welcome.
Yeah.
This is so fun. Wow, we're really across the Atlantic here. Cool. Who's oh, Moshe. Moshe, like to introduce yourself? Can't tell. Okay, so we'll move. Oh. Okay, Ariel.
Hi.
Hey,
Hey,
welcome.
thank you. I'm studying in Mechina, and also joined Rabbi Udren in the first semester out
Where are
in
you
Peru.
from?
I'm from Peru.
Sick. Welcome.
Thank you, thank you. I made Aliyah 5 years ago,
Oh, wow.
and now I'm like everyone else, studying online. You know, it's not that bad actually. It's fine.
Okay. We'll try and make it a bit better. Cool, cool. Who's there's a guest that just joined. Do you want to introduce yourself? Is that you? Oh, yeah, that's right. Okay.
Hi, yes. I'm Shira Kaplan, joining from Louisiana.
Hey, welcome.
Hi, Shira.
Hello.
Where were you? What's your link to RRG? What's your?
Oh, sorry. Okay, so I studied
yeah, cool.
abroad at Hebrew U in the fall of 2017, and I learned with my chavruta Jillian Sperber every Monday night at Hebrew U.
Amazing. All right, well, welcome back. This is really fun, guys. I'm psyched. This is a good crew. Is there anyone who it's hard to tell with the link here. If I think that's everyone. If anyone joins, on the way, we'll tell them we all said embarrassing stories, and we'll see what they have to share. Okay, so I guess we'll get the show on the road. This is really exciting. So I just posted. Oh, first of all, just a few. An introductory statement, sort of about how I run my chaburas. Typically, for those of you who aren't familiar. Sorry. Okay. Okay, cool. So for anyone who's not familiar, usually the way I run my chabura, I'm very selfish. And I know everything that I have to say, but I don't know anything about what you guys have to say. So my priority is for you to say what you have to say and share what you can. And what you want to. That's my selfish priority. So that's just number one. And number two is that everything is sacred, but nothing is sacred. So what that means is that really feel free to challenge, question anything, no matter how blasphemous it may sound or seem. Or really be as radical as you want. Ask any question that comes to mind, and usually it only adds to the conversation and enhances everyone's experience. And I may not have the answer to everything. I would never profess that, but really, please feel free to share, speak up whenever you want, shout out. I don't know exactly how that works here, but I assume if you can just unmute yourself, feel free at any time and just go for it. Also, we'll kick things off. People will read, and it'll be very chabura style. We'll try and simulate that chabura experience over Zoom. Okay, so I don't know if you guys can see. Can you guys all access in the chat? I posted a link to the sheet. And their reactions. Cool. Okay, thumbs up means you got it. Amazing. Okay, this is so cool. This is awesome. Okay, cool. So if everyone's got the sheet, I'm not sending it one more time. My pleasure. Here you go. Okay. Let me know if that works. Anytime. Okay, cool. All right. So as soon as everyone has it up, basically, okay. So before we start looking at the sheet, I just want to sort of give a little bit of a preface. Right. So this series is about Passover. We're about to approach Passover, and one of the big topics and themes of Passover is the redemption of the Jewish nation from Egypt, and we all leave Egypt sort of together in this crazy experience after years of suffering and slavery, and from there we go on our national journey to become a nation. We ultimately enter Israel. And a lot of times, I think it's difficult to appreciate what it means to be a nation and to be part of a nation. And so what I want to try and explore with you guys tonight, and I want to hear your takes on this as well, is what exactly does it mean to be a nation? How do we become a nation? What does that look like? And how did it all begin? So just the first source that we're going to do, I guess before we jump into the sources, I'm not gonna, I don't know how, okay. Anyone, when we say nation, or when you think of like a national connection, what comes to mind? Feel free to just speak out, anyone who wants. Oh, I feel like it's easier if we all do it just vocally unless it gets too crazy, and then we'll go back to chat. But Andrew, you wanna speak? You wanna?
Okay. It's just a little easier sometimes to type. I just said a nation to me is a shared history and a shared language.
Cool.
And a
Okay.
shared experience, I guess you can say too, a shared experience.
Okay. Okay, so you're saying that even though we, Jew, let's say in Panama, who has never met a Jew in Russia, could still be considered the same. Well, you're saying they would not be considered the same nation because they, or would they be considered the same nation if they haven't, the same shared history, the same language?
I mean, not necessarily. Of course not. Like the shared history, shared language, shared experiences can come from a kind of a shared myth. You know what I mean?
Okay.
Shared mythological past or history or these kinds of things.
Okay.
So on a more like a broad kind of transcendental level, if you want to call it.
Yeah.
Not just the
I think,
physical, like your what's it called? Your immediate surroundings.
Sure, yeah. So I think what Andrew's saying, and I'd be curious if I can't see all your facial reactions, which is usually how I gauge if people are in disagreement. Although Dahlia, you seem to be a little bit, I don't know if you're so on board with that definition, but just if I understood correctly, what Andrew's insinuating is that perhaps a national connection doesn't actually require your own experience, but rather a link, some perceived link, even if it's like a very ancient mythological historical connection. Is that correct, Andrew?
Yeah, exactly. That's kind of what I'm saying.
Okay. Okay, cool. Dolly, what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I agree. Some kind of historical link, like some shared land that like we have some kind of nation, like that people have some kind of attachment to, like shared set of values normally is what I think about. Yeah.
So just language, because one other thing which Andrew mentioned was language. How do you think is that as important? Is that relevant? Is that?
I mean, I guess when I think about Israel, yes, but then when I think of somewhere like Canada, no, because we're like a multicultural nation and people like English is our main language and then French, but there are people who don't speak either of those languages, but I wouldn't say they're not like that they're not Canadian citizens, right?
Do you feel a national link? Actually, it's interesting to me. You're in Toronto, you said, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so do you feel a national link to the Quebecois, for example, right? Which is, for those who don't know, is like a French group of Canadians who are in Quebec. Welcome to the call, Liana.
No, I don't. I mean, I go to Montreal a couple times a year, but I guess I don't feel attached to the Quebecois, probably more so because if I've asked for directions or something not in French, people have been mean to me. But
okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So okay, but you also, meaning it sounds like even though, and well, I guess you might not share the history there, the language, but you do share a country.
Yeah.
Okay, and I mean, do any Americans in the group want to chime in about whether they feel a national connection to other Americans, or? Ariel, you're from, you said you're from Peru?
Yeah.
How do you feel towards do you feel a link to other Peruvians, or are you, how do you identify?
Well, yeah, kind of. I mean, I was raised as a Jew in Peru. And I also had like non-Jewish friends, and we shared the same language and, let's say, same soccer team. But I don't think I consider myself part of the same nation as them, because they have different customs. And that's what I wanted to talk about, customs. I wanted to add it to the list. I mean, we talked about shared history, language, and maybe also a country, but customs. And that's why, that's the difference between us and the rest of the world. The customs, the mitzvot, the traditions, you know, tefillin. Let's say that the aliens come from Mars to Earth and they see us putting tefillin, or I don't know, Brit Milah. It's so weird. It's so weird and special the same way. That's what I meant.
Okay.
Why would you wrap some leather cubes to your body to sort of build a connection with God? Or, I mean, you see what I mean?
Yeah.
Is
Yeah. No, I think it's, sorry. Yeah, I didn't cut you off. Continue.
so yeah, the customs. I feel that I have sort of a connection with the people I grew up with, but it's not the same because we have different, you know, traditions and customs or whatever. Yeah.
So I'll just go back to Andrew for a sec, because it sounds like Andrew. I'm curious if you agree, or if what Moshe you're saying it right. Did I get that wrong? Your name's, oh, Ariel, I'm sorry. If you might, like, I'm curious if you agree, because on one hand you said shared history, but then you also said shared experience. And Ariel pinpointed, or at least for in his experience, what his identity of nationhood stems from is more customs, as opposed to, let's say, a shared history per se, or language.
Right. Yeah, I mean, I agree to some extent, but I don't think it's a fundamental situation, because even, I mean, even, I don't know, I've heard Jews in back in the day had different customs, if you want to call it, in terms of how makpid they were regarding, like, of tuma, what's it called? Taur, yeah.
Yeah,
like
ritual
I heard back in the day, I don't know, when I was reading, when I was learning Tanakh, like some Jews were very makpid, and so everyone can eat at their home, but other Jews weren't so makpid, so like people like literally didn't eat at their home because like they weren't makpid enough for their tuma situation. So I mean, that to me is like a different custom, even among the same nation, if you want to call it. So
right,
like how makpid a particular family would be for Tuma Taur, or how makpid a certain family would be with Shechita. Those, to me, there's like a lot of room for different customs, if you want to call it minhagim, if you want to call it. But the core is really shared history, shared myth, and the shared language that myth and that history is manifested in. Really.
Okay. So it sounds like we have a few camps here to start us off, which is always great. We have shared history, shared myths. We have common language, and we have Ariel and camp customs. And these are all really strong aspects, as we're about to see play out through the development of the Jewish people.
Azariah, can I just throw one more word in?
Yeah, please. Oh, I didn't see it. Yeah, please.
No, I didn't try yet. You didn't do anything wrong. I think this goes along with what Andrew Pico says, but I just want to throw in the word story. I think that goes along with, what did you use, Andrew? Myth, legend. To me, the word story has been something, you know, I think that really binds us, especially when we're talking about Pesach.
That's probably a better word, yeah.
I think that there's, you know, I like those other words, and I think there's what to say about it as well. But I think specifically for me, just around Pesach time, especially because we have this very unique mitzvah and this very unique opportunity on Seder night to tell a story, which is such a weird mitzvah, but such a beautiful mitzvah too. Like Ariel said, it's weird and beautiful, right? I don't know if it's as weird as putting leather boxes on your body, but it's still pretty unusual. So anyway, I just want to throw in the word story too.
No, that's great, and that's actually that sort of brings the conclusion before we got there, because one of the things we're going to talk about in linking all this. Sorry, no, this is great. Spoiler alert. We're still okay. We're still all here. One of the things we're going to talk about is how this manifests in the Seder and in our Seder experience. And I think what basically a lot of the points that you all raised, individually thinking about what it means to be a nation, do have their place in the Seder, and that's what we're going to get. But first, we're going to take it all the way back to Genesis, to Bereshit, Genesis 46. It's towards the end of Sefer Bereshit, of the book of Genesis, just to sort of set the scene here. This is, for those of you familiar with the story, there's a famine, right? And Joseph is in Egypt, and basically, after revealing that Joseph is indeed in Egypt, so the whole family comes down now to to Mitzrayim, to Egypt. And when they settle there, these are the verses that describe sort of what it is. And I want you to pay attention as we read through this to what seems to be repeated, what seems to be emphasized in the Torah, in the verses. Typically, there's a rule or a rule of thumb amongst traditional commentators where words are not wasted in the Torah, which means that anytime there's a repetition, there's a reason for that repetition. And so as we read through these, I think we'll read through them for everyone's sake. We'll just do it in English, but the Hebrew is alongside. As we read through them, try to be sensitive towards what's being repeated, what's being emphasized, perhaps what's being left out. Can I have a volunteer to take the first source? Oh, Donnie, welcome.
Hey,
How's it going?
do you have the sources for us?
Oh, yeah. Here, I'll repost them in the. Here, I reposted them in the chat group.
Ah, perfect.
Here's-
Thanks.
Oh, you sent a link. How's it going? Welcome. This is so fun.
Thanks.
Do you want to just hear? We did an icebreaker before. You want to just, your name, where you're from?
Me, I'm Donnie, and I'm from Teaneck, New Jersey. Yeah,
And where are you calling in from?
and I'm now in Jerusalem.
Cool.
Yeah.
Welcome to the show.
Do you want me to read?
Yeah, if you don't mind, if you have it in front of you.
Which part?
The first source, Genesis
that?
46. Yeah, you can take the English just so we can all follow, but also the Hebrews alongside for anyone who wants.
Okay. So Israel set out with all that was his, and he came to Beersheba, where he offered sacrifices to the God of his father Isaac. God called to Israel in a vision by night, Jacob, Jacob. He answered, Here. And he said, I am God, the God of your father. Fear not to go down to Egypt, for I will make you there into a great nation. I myself will go down with you to Egypt, and I myself will also bring you back. And Joseph's hand shall close your eyes. So Jacob set out for Beersheba. The sons of Israel put their father Jacob and their children and their wives in the wagons that Pharaoh had sent to transport him. And they took along their livestock and the wealth that they had amassed in the land of Canaan. Thus Jacob and all his offspring with him came to Egypt. He brought with him to Egypt his sons and grandsons, his daughters and granddaughters, all his offspring.
Amazing. Okay, what sticks out to people? What are we noticing here? What's missing? What's sticking out? What's bothering us? Shout out. You guys are too polite. So. No, what you got for us?
I'm sorry, I just got back, so I didn't hear what you guys were talking about, but I'll join in.
So fun. Sorry for the call out. No, I don't know. Did anyone, when looking through this first source, did anything stick out to anyone? Did anything bother anyone? See any repetition?
I feel like it does a lot of just explaining how everybody's related to who. Like, presumably we know some of these characters already, but it's going through exactly all the family relations and how everybody fits. Like, there's like granddaughters, daughters, father, like all these different relationships between people.
Okay, amazing. Why would that? First of all, who are you? You want to introduce yourself briefly?
Hi, I'm Aliana.
Welcome. Where are you from? Where are you calling from?
I'm in Tel Aviv.
Cool. Okay, yeah. So what bothers you about that repetition?
I feel like either it should be a genealogy and then that should be what's going on, or it could be a story and then that should be what's going on. But this seems like some kind of a mashup.
Okay, right. So on the one hand, like the Torah seems to be like setting the scene and telling us that Jacob's going down to Egypt. What would you rather have them say? They're just sort of trying to tell the story.
Like, I wouldn't need his father Isaac. Like, Isaac is enough, or just his father.
Okay, you're saying there's like too much family in this story. Just give me the Jacob is going, maybe Jacob and his father, or Jacob son of Isaac. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. That definitely, I definitely see that in there. Yeah, Pixel 3.
Okay, so I like the fact that it changes back and forth between Yaakov and Bnei Israel. Can you hear me?
Yeah, you're on.
Okay, so at some point it's Yaakov and at some points it's Bnei Israel. And I do remember learning at one point that in the places where Yaakov is mentioned, it's more of a familial patriarch, and where Bnei Israel is mentioned, or when Yisrael is mentioned, it's more of nation building and establishing Yisrael and the Goy,
Cool.
like it's here. And then the repetition of the word Goy, I think the last time we heard that was when Hashem made promises to Abraham. And
Okay.
that was, and so that connection, that phrase is connected to the promises that were made to make us a nation.
Amazing. So that's also already, once again, taking us to part of the conclusion already here. But if I flesh out what that's my mother for those who weren't here before. If I can flesh out what my mother's saying, Ima, and if I'm misspeaking, of course, correct. Is that actually the biblical terminology, sort of playing along what Eliana was saying, the biblical choice of the word Jacob here is to emphasize the familial nature as opposed to that of Yisrael. For those of you who are familiar, earlier on in Genesis, Jacob gets a new name after he wrestles an angel of God, and he gets his new name Yisrael. And the use of the term Jacob here is sort of reverting back to his familial name, right? He's just Papa Jacob, as opposed to Israel. And you see that transition in these verses. If you look at between the first verse and the second verse, you already see that transition. And I see, Rabbi Yudrin, you entered in the comments that you noticed that transition as well, from this grand figure of Israel to Jacob. Do you want to add anything to that, Rabbi Yudrin?
No, I actually am very impressed with your mom's approach. I'll leave it there.
Okay. I think the objective of this Chabura just became to make me blush as much as possible.
My mom was on last night, and I blushed quite a bit. So
I'm glad the traditions continue.
Okay, I'm gonna go on mute. Let somebody else talk.
No, I mean, whatever. Anyone? Yeah, I don't know if anyone else, anything stick out to anyone else? Anyone want to, from these verses? You can take another second to look them through. Is there anything missing from these verses that maybe So I'll just add while you guys are looking at the verses, I'll just add one note that someone, when I was learning this in a different context, someone pointed out that we know very famously that Abraham was very influential and had a lot of followers. And I'm not sure if that was true for Jacob, but one of the things which we do see here, similar to what everyone else is saying, is that whoever, and there were some servants perhaps. Were there servants with them? Is it in the verses? So it's not specified, I don't think, unless I'm missing it. I don't think the servants or anything aside for the family is not specified here in the verses, and it's really emphasized a few times, both in how they express Jacob as opposed to Israel, and how they're going down to Egypt, and it specifies and reiterates v'chol zar'o banav uvnei banav ito v'notav uvnot banav. Very egalitarian, but a very particular phrasing that emphasizes the familial nature. And I think that's not for naught, because what we're about to see now that we're in Egypt in the next book is we're going to see that we all started out as a family, and now we're going to transition to becoming a nation. And it was very important for the Torah in these verses to really emphasize that the national project began as a family. And really through this family, these descendants of Abraham, and Yitzchak and Jacob, specifically Jacob's family, becomes a nation as we enter this next period. So if you want to just quickly read the next verse, next source, it's actually meant to merge. I'll just read it quickly, and then we'll move on to the Egypt stage of this process. So, right, Kol Nefesh Habal Yaakov, so all the persons belonging to Jacob who came to Egypt, his own issue. Aside from the wives of Jacob's sons, all these persons numbered 66, and Joseph's sons who were born to him in Egypt were 2 in number. Thus, the total of Jacob's household who came to Egypt was 70 persons. So basically, we see here yet again the Torah, the following verses again re-emphasize at the end of a huge segment. This is family. We're talking about family. We're going into Egypt as a family. And with that, the first time that we were, I would take us to the first parak, the first chapter in Exodus, after the reunion of Joseph and his family, and they're entrenched, they're settled in Egypt. So here comes chapter 1. We're going to skip the opening lines, just go to verse 8, but anyone's welcome to read the fuller context.
Sorry, Azariah, I just wanted to point something out that came to me as you were speaking.
Yeah, please.
If someone asked the question in the first source, who is the head of the family, we would think that it would be Yaakov or Israel, whichever the name would be appropriate. But the fact that Hashem says very beautifully, Anochi yored imach, or imacha. Hashem's going down, right? So he is a part of this nation. He's a part of this family. I don't know if you'd say he's the head per se, or but we're not alone, so to speak. It's not that Yaakov is being sent by himself with his family on some sort of journey by himself to become a nation. Hashem is telling him very clearly that I'm with you, I'm going down with you, so to speak. And there's a joined purpose, I think, that's being expressed in that pasuk that I think is very beautiful.
Yeah, no, thank you for sharing that. That's a really good point that I didn't notice. I wonder. I would be curious. Side note, and we don't need to go into this now, but I'd be curious actually to see how that compares with, let's say, the Lech Lecha or the other missions to Egypt that the various patriarchs went through, to see sort of if that language carries through, if that sentiment carries through. But it's a really cool point that God in these passages is emphasizing that he's coming down with us also as like the family unit, sort of already, with the guidance of God that we're going to see sort of later on in the story, maybe a little foreshadowing. So yeah, thank you for pointing that out. Does anyone want to take the first verse? It's the first 2 verses in Egypt section in Exodus, verses 8 and 9. Can we get a brave volunteer? Okay, don't even have to be so brave.
I can do it. I tried to press the
Thanks.
space button, but it didn't work. Okay. A new king arose over Egypt who did not know Joseph, and he said to his people, "Look, the Israelite people are much too numerous for us."
Cool. Okay. This is the beginning of the slavery. I still can speak English. This is the beginning of the slavery, right? Pharaoh, a new king, arose over Egypt who did not know Joseph. So the commentaries go to town about how is it possible that a king did not know Joseph. We're not going to deal with that now. And he said to his people, okay, notice we're starting to talk in terms of nationhood. Hine am b'nei Israel rav v'atzum mimenu. Look, the Israelite people are much too numerous for us. So this is really interesting. This is actually the first time in the entire Torah that we are referred to as a nation, and it's actually Pharaoh who is calling us a nation. The first person to call us a nation is not God. It is not, any of the patriarchs. It is Pharaoh, and that always struck me as kind of interesting, because that also implies in the Torah's view that nationhood is not necessarily something it's something that is bestowed upon people by man. Meaning it does sort of derive from a human experience or categorization. I'm curious if anyone have any thoughts about the fact that Pharaoh specifically, who is ultimately going to put us into slavery, is categorizing us as a people.
Well, I heard from some Midrashim that it was actually the same Pharaoh. Okay. I don't know if that's true. I heard it, but I don't quite remember if it's true. The thing is, when it says "Vayakom melech hadash al Mitzrayim," it means a king with a different point of view or a different way of thinking. not like specifically or literally a new person, a new king.
Right.
Is it true? I don't quite remember.
I think the jury's really out on that. I think there are a few different views with respect to who this new king is. Famously, I think Rashi's perspective is that, and if someone knows better, they can correct me. I don't actually have it in front. Actually, oh, I might be able to get it in front of me right now. Oh, the power of this is amazing. Here we go. Famously, so there was a machloket, there is a difference of opinion Rashi cites between Rav and Shmuel with respect to whether or not it's actually a new king or the same king. This is amazing technology, guys. This is incredible. And yeah, sorry, Ariel.
Yeah, so that's what I meant. I mean,
yeah.
I think, yeah. So I was right.
Well, it's actually funny you mention it because it does actually influence the narrative. Right? If we're talking about this new king, so if it's the same king and it's just a new approach and a new perspective on the Jewish people, so it's really interesting that his approach towards his like new big idea towards the Jews is let's categorize them as the Israelite people, as calling us a nation. And if I flesh that out a little more, I would say that the first time that we were categorized as a people was actually, we were sort of being externalized as a people. We were considered a people, not as an Am HaNivchar, not as necessarily a chosen nation, which we might briefly touch upon later, but really we were nationalized, so to speak, to be separated, which is something that we, for any of you who've visited Yad Vashem, a big part, not to get too far into, I definitely don't purport to be an expert in Holocaust studies, to my discredit, but one of the things that we see there also is that there's a demonization of the Jews, which begins from sort of a separation. And perhaps that's the new idea that Pharaoh is bringing, that this new Pharaoh, who's really the same Pharaoh, is bringing to the table here. But if you're not accepting that interpretation, I'm not going to push that one. Donnie doesn't seem too impressed with that interpretation. Yeah, Andrew.
I'll just say I do think it's kind of weird that he does call them a nation, because like it does seem a very, very, very like what's the word? A particular definition of nation, because it's literally just Bnei Israel, the sons of Israel. Like he says, like Inayam Bnei Israel, like he defines the nation as Bnei, like the sons of Israel, which is very, very particularist. Doesn't really fit my definition on the thing. I think it's way too like particularist and it isn't as broad as what we talked about previously about what.
Well,
nation,
specifically, your argument of what makes a nation is a shared history and common language.
Right. I mean, that's definitely what a family has for sure.
Right.
But I don't know. It just seems a little bit like way particular. It seems very early to call Bnei Israel a nation at this point. I do think it's a little weird.
Right. Okay, no, yeah, I would agree. I mean, some of the verses that I skipped, and also I think in general, what the Jewish nation here is going through and will continue to go through is a tremendous growth in their population. So it could be that, I mean, we're not talking about 70 people anymore, it seems. But unless anyone else has anything they want to add. Yeah, please.
At this point, I feel like all of the Bnei Israel's been living in Goshen for like, I don't know, however many years passed between. And I feel like that's also just something that this sort of like, I remember, I don't know if this is 100% correct, but I feel like I remember it being that Yosef didn't want to insult Pharaoh by having, he didn't want all of Bnei Israel to be living with the Egyptians, but he wanted them to kind of be separate. So that they could continue to flourish as their own people, but not be influenced by the very like, not so moral society of Egypt. And I feel like to this sort of like this choice, this like self-separation to make is really helpful in the formation of a nation. But then it also, like you said, really increases this otherness because they're a separate people doing their own thing, and which is great again for building a nation, but not for the general view of the Egyptians.
Yeah, no, I think you're raising a really, I don't know if everyone followed that, but what Shira, that was Shira, right?
Yeah. Sorry.
Okay, cool. Or what our guest has mentioned, what Shira was raising is that the Jews, which is an important facet to this whole narrative, right? Is that, oh, there you go. an important facet to this whole narrative is that the Jews throughout this time settled in Eretz Goshen, in the land of Goshen, which was distinctly separate from the rest of the Egyptians. Also, some things that might expand on what she was mentioning, because many of you might be familiar with the Midrashic discussion around the Jewish preservation of what they wore and what they spoke, and how they spoke. Preserving their language and their dress was an important facet of the Jewish experience in Egypt at that time, which again also distinguishes people and separates them from the rest of the populace. And I know that I gave it a little bit of a negative twang when I discussed what it means to be a nation as Paro's definition, but it could also just be neutralized as sort of like this general inherent in being a nation. There's also a certain degree of separation that is being created between who's the nation and who's out of the nation. Oh, hi. Wait, someone just joined?
Yeah.
Rabbi Simon. Hey, do you want to introduce yourself? Shalom. Okay. In the meantime, we'll move on to the next thing.
Shalom, shalom, lekulam.
Hey, welcome. Where are you from? What's your name? Where you joining us from? Rav Shimon Bar Yochai.
I'm from Turkey.
Oh.
Amazing. Cool. Okay. Do you want us to refer to you as Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai, Rashbi? Do you have a
No.
pronoun?
I need Nisim.
Sorry?
I need Nisim.
Nisim. Okay. Welcome, Nisim.
Okay.
Welcome. Okay. So wow.
I'm
So
talking
really...
about Torah.
All right. So we're gonna continue for a moment. Welcome. We're so glad you could join us.
Listen to you.
Okay, great, amazing. Well, we're glad you could join us. So we were just discussing that we were classified as a nation, and this is really an amazing demonstration of that from all around the world. We're classified as a nation
I just heard. Sorry to interrupt you. I heard something from what Shira mentioned that, when in her words, that I didn't necessarily hear you picked up on, which was something that came across to me, was that it's being used here in a connotation to separate them and to identify them as other, because what we're getting very soon is certain gzerot against them. This is the beginning of the shiabud. So anytime you want to start any kind of separation or creating this sense of us and them, calling them an am, the implication I think is that they are really not us. And in the calling of us of the am, it doesn't seem to be par. It doesn't seem to be just stating a general fact. It seems to be part of the tachbula, the kind of how do you say tachbula? Like the way that he's trying to kind of create this whole narrative about the Jews they're going to, or about Bnei Yisrael, they're going to either team up against, with our enemies and drive us out, or they're going to team up with our enemies and they're going to leave, something about that. In other words, this is the beginning of that process of othering them, right? So here the concept of Am is, I think, being used in a very kind of evil, almost anti-Semitic type of kind of context, and to really distinguish them as other than us. So it's interesting that it comes from Paro, because we don't really see ourselves as an Am, as far as I guess I understand, though maybe this will change my perspective on it, but we don't necessarily understand ourselves as an Am until we come out of Mitzrayim, either after we cross over the Red Sea and kind of go through that experience, or till we come to Har Sinai, or maybe that's kind of the culmination of the process per se, but us as an Am per se doesn't seem like it really comes to play, or at least the way that we see ourselves as an Am doesn't come to play necessarily until much later. So I don't know, there's
amazing. I'm glad you raised that. So it could be, the truth is that hasn't come up in the past, but it's a really good point, which is that perhaps the Torah doesn't agree with Paro. I think one reason why people might read this verse and think that the Torah is adopting a definition of nation which might start this early is because the Torah is choosing to include that word, but it could be that Torah is saying this is what Paro thinks is a nation. This is maybe the universalist definition of nation, but God won't call us a nation until later on, kind of thing. Or the Jews, we won't refer to ourselves as a nation until later on. That's actually what we're going to see in a moment. So I'm glad you raised that. It could be that there's sort of there's a disagreement there between the Torah's view on an amanat and we'll call it the Egyptian view on nationhood, or it could be that they're synchronous. It's a really good point, which we might be able to see a little bit more about later on and have maybe evidence one way or the other. But at least in previous readings, this is the Torah's first use of the term Am for the Jewish people. So I could see people also making the argument that this is the Torah's, this is when our nationhood began, when we were targeted. But also while we were a family unit, we were still like very nuclear, even though we've grown a bit. But okay, so nation. If people are typing, I think it's just easier if people want to speak up. I just can't follow the chat. It's overwhelming technology. Okay, so we'll unless anyone else has anything they want to add on this note, I want to take us to the next sort of episode after we have slavery and a few things happen with Moses. I want to sort of fast forward to our exodus, our grand departure from Egypt. And right before we leave Egypt, again, we are already a nation, whatever that means, at least in Paro's eyes. But right before we leave Egypt, the night before, if you see the next source that I brought, we are given a very interesting commandment. We're given two major commandments. One is the first commandment, that is of Rosh Chodesh, HaChodesh Zalachem, that is the ability to create a calendar. One of the first things that we did as a nation was we created a calendar. We were given sort of the right by God to define our timetable, which is a really profound commandment. Having been slaves, to sort of reclaim our time and decide and designate our moadim, our holidays for God, our dates of celebration for God. And there's a lot of discussion. For those who are familiar with Masechet Rosh Hashanah, tractate Rosh Hashanah, there's a lot of discussion about what exactly is this power that God gave us to create our time as the first commandment as a nation. But the second commandment, arguably, that we got as a nation is that of Korban Pesach, and that will sort of bring us towards the Passover Seder and help us integrate this into the experience that we're all about to undergo. So without further ado, someone will read the next passage, the Exodus chapter 12, verse 41 through 51. In English, you can take maybe we'll break it up into two. We'll do 41 through, I guess only 10 verses and it's English, so. Or we'll do 5 and 5. Someone 41 through 46?
Yeah, I'll go.
Thanks, Arya.
Yeah, but don't make fun of my accent, please.
Not at all. It's better than my Peruvian, which is Spanish, probably. Right.
Yeah, good one. Okay, at the end of the 430th year, to the very day, all the ranks of the Lord departed from the land of Egypt. That was for the Lord a night of vigil to bring them out of the land of Egypt. The same night in the Lord's one of vigil for all the children of Israel throughout the ages. The Lord said to Moses and Aaron, "This is the law of the Passover offering. No foreigner shall eat of it. But any slave a man has bought many of it, he has been circumcised. No bond or hired laborer shall eat of it."
Okay, wait.
Yeah.
So I just want to pause for 1 sec to sort of, now that we're in the crux again, this is like the night before our departure from, or right up on the brink of our departure from Egypt. This is our commandment that we're receiving here. We're being told to take the Passover, the sacrificial lamb, and sacrifice a sacrifice to God. And there are very, very unique conditions that are being discussed here, very particular way in which we are being presented this commandment, and I want us to try and focus on that when we read the next bit, and also what we just read. So So again, so starting from verse 43, Ariel, you want to take 43, and you were doing great. So 43 to 51.
Yeah, shall I continue?
Amazing. Yes, please.
Okay, so 43. The Lord said to Moses and Aaron, "This is the law of the Passover offering. No foreigner shall eat of it. But any slave a man has bought many of it he has been circumcised. No bond or hired laborer shall eat of it. It shall be eaten in one house. You shall not take any of the flesh outside the house, nor shall you break a bone of it. The whole community of Israel shall offer it. And a stranger who deals with you would offer the Passover to the Lord. All his males must be circumcised. Then he shall be admitted to offer it. He shall then be a citizen of the country. But no uncircumcised person may eat of it. There shall be one law for the citizen and for the stranger who dwells among you. And all the Israelites did so, as the Lord had commanded Moses and Aaron, so they did. That very day the Lord freed the Israelites from the land of Egypt, troop by troop.
Amazing. Okay. What stuck out did anything stand out to you guys? Did anything bother you in the passages we read? Not a simple commandment, a little difficult maybe to follow.
I had something that got.
Wait. I can't hear you so well.
It talks about how no bound or hired labor.
Still can't hear you. Can't hear you so well. Maybe if you want, you can type in the chat and we'll read it, I guess, or you can try again.
Is now any better?
No.
Not that much. Sorry.
Okay.
But please type in the group chat and we'll read it. Does anyone else wanna, in the meantime, while Tanima's
Okay, so what's noticeable to me is until now, the Brit Milah was not necessarily a defining method of saying who Am Yisrael is, but clearly when it comes to Korban Pesach, then it has to be somebody who was Mal, somebody who had a Brit Milah. And like I wrote in the chat, but is that when others are defining us, it's usually for persecution, but when we are defining ourselves, it's usually for a positive and active role or gathering. In other words, we are pulling together with specific definitions, and we're doing it in a positive way. When others do it and ascribe us, because we're too many or too rich or too this or too that, right? Like Haman, Amifuzar, Mporad, then it's usually the beginning of persecution. But here we've said, okay, if you want part of Korban Pesach, you have to be Mal.
Amazing. So I just want to flesh out, sort of parse out what you said, because there are a lot of things just in that one soundbite. There are a lot of different ideas. First of all, that there's a difference, which is really cool. You're sort of similar to what Rabbi Yudrin perhaps was saying before, and tell me if I'm putting words in your mouth too, of course. Is that a nation, as opposed to the way Paro sort of defined it, sort of the start of slavery was you're a nation as a separate entity, and now the start of redemption comes about through the creation of a nation that has a positive mission. In other words, we're not just a nation on our own terms. When we decide what is a nation, we're not just a nation that is separate from and is numerous and is in this quadrant of Egypt that is off to itself and with its own language and its own separated sort of qualities, but rather we're unifying together for this one mission. In this case, of sacrificing to God and of sanctifying Passover. And I think that's a really, really profound point, which is thank you for adding that, which is that difference, that when we're talking about our nationhood, and we're defining the terms that we're going towards redemption, which is obviously a theme of Passover, and we'll get there in a moment. Our mission is what makes us a nation, not our separation per se. And I think that's a really important part. Another thing which you touched upon is that significance of being circumcised for this korban, for this sacrifice. And really, for anyone who's familiar with Leviticus, and even a lot of Exodus, there's a ton. I don't even know how many sacrifices and different offerings that are talked about. And few, if any of them, I think none of them have anything to do with circumcision. Circumcision seems like this, what's the relevance? But this is just sort of like a relevant practice to the sacrificial lamb of Passover. Does anyone have any thoughts to offer towards like what might be the link there, or why the Torah might be doing that? Like, why is circumcision yeah.
It's obviously a permanent commitment, and it's obviously something that would physically differentiate those who are part and those who are not forever. So this is it. Do you commit or do you not commit? And I think that speaks volumes, right?
Sure. Yeah. So yes, there's definitely so one aspect of the circumcision is definitely the permanence, and it's a rather significant endeavor to undergo in the interest of becoming part of a nation. So that's definitely true. And if that were, I don't know, does anyone else have anything to? Yeah, Donnie.
Maybe it has to do with the fact you said that this is the second commandment to Am Yisrael as a nation, and I think Brit Milah is one of the fundamental things that make us a part of the nation. So more so than other korbanot, that this would be one that, like, only if you have a Brit Milah, then you could take part in it.
Okay.
Are you saying, Danny, that it's the Brit Milah then that is makshir, the really central item, which is the Korban Pesach? In other words, as opposed to what Mrs. HaCohen said, that's how you go by, I hope I said it correctly, that the central point here is the milah itself. But according to what you're saying, Danny, it sounds like no, it's like a heksher mitzvah, so to speak. In other words, really the goal is to be able to experience the Korban Pesach together. But in order to have your entrance card, so to speak, I hope you have to check your milah at the door, I guess. Don't want to get into specifics about that.
Yeah.
But that's kind of the implication, right? Is that what you're saying, Danny?
I'm trying to find the nafkamina, or the difference between other korbanot and Korban Pesach. What's unique about Korban Pesach? So I would think that's just a suggestion.
Yeah. No, to bring that together, just for anyone who just to sort of reiterate, and Donnie, again, correct me if I'm misspeaking. What Donnie's pointing out, which is a really cool point, is that evidently there's a difference here between the Korban Pesach, the Passover sacrifice, and all the other sacrifices in the Torah. And one of them, which perhaps might be a difference, is that fundamental national aspect of this sacrifice, which in order to be a part of that, one would need to be part of the nation. And so the link of these practices emphasizing that national imperative in both of those in the sacrifice. Is that correct? Donnie, is that about what you said? Yeah. Okay. Thumbs up. Okay. Cool. Okay. So in other words, sorry. In other words, there's an aspect, right? There's an aspect of this where we're creating a nation. This is a national sacrifice, and so Brit Milah is relevant. One other aspect. Does anyone have? I don't know. Does anyone have anything to add on to that? It's hard. I can't follow the facial. Yeah, please.
I have a question. At the beginning, it says, to the very day, all the ranks of the Lord, Kol Tzvaot Hashem,
Ah.
meaning army, like soldiers, right? What did Torah mean?
Good question. I'm not sure. I think tzvaot is generally a term used in the Torah. Correct me if I'm anyone who has more knowledge, of course, welcome to add. I think it's usually a term meant to define a large group.
Yeah, because we
sort
were
of.
slaves.
Sorry?
We were slaves. I mean, it's not related to any army concept
Yeah.
or
I think in the
idea.
Torah it's more
That's what we were.
spiritual than.
Yeah, spiritual. That's what I was thinking. Yeah, good one.
By the way, actually, that's a really fair point. I didn't even think about, but it's a really, I didn't think about that word here, but playing off what Ariel's saying, I think using that word tzvaot and what Donnie's saying as this spiritual mission sort of thing also links to that concept of here we have a spiritual mission. We have a mission as a nation. We're not just, we're not just B'nai Israel. We are B'nai Israel, Meretz Yisrael, Al Tzivotam. We also have this mission aspect to us in this commandment. One aspect, going back to the national thing here, some of you may be familiar, but when it comes to the Passover sacrifice, so I don't know, some of you may be familiar with this, others not, but it's actually, there are a lot of very specific halachot, requirements for this korban specifically, including that it must be eaten in a group setting. And I think that also links perhaps to the national sort of experience that we're trying to create around this Passover over sacrifice. Also, sort of playing off of what Donnie was saying before, that different this korban, this sacrifice is inherently different than any other. And also along his notes, unless anyone has anything specific to add from these verses.
Sorry to hold you up,
please.
Azariah, but something
Not
that's really
interrupting.
sticking out to me is that we're broadening the picture here. I'm not sure if the term ger has a context in this section about a ger toshav or a ger tzedek. In other words, someone who is a non-Jew who lives amongst us, or we're talking about a convert. I'm not sure how the concept of a convert would work at this stage in history, but this seems to be implying anyway that this is not just for right now, but this is something going forward as well, right? But there is an opening towards allowing others. In other words, there's something specific about what's going on here. The milah, that's a necessary act that needs to be done in order to take part in the Korban Pesach. But we're also opening it up to the ger, ki yagor itcha ger. It sounds like it's a ger toshav and not necessarily a ger tzedek, so I'm not sure. So there's an opening here. Ki ezrach haaretz, there's something broader and bigger. I guess what I'm trying to point out is that it is specific, but it also has a universalistic aspect to it as well, that we would allow this to be open to others that don't fit necessarily the mamad, the status specifically of B'nai Israel that came from this family.
Amazing. Actually, that was one of the points that I was thinking of raising earlier. I'm glad you raised it. Is that concept of a ger here, which is weird because similar, just to revert back to what Rav Yonatan was saying, we're a nation of slaves. And I think Donnie also, maybe even Ariel mentioned this previously briefly, is that we're a nation of slaves right now. Like we are coming out of literally the lowest of the low on the socioeconomic meter. And we don't have like converts. We're not popular. We're not converts. We don't have a country. We don't have citizens and strangers. This isn't where we're at right now. It's a completely irrelevant narrative to what we're experiencing. Yet at the same time, that is inherent to the commandment, right? That this commandment is not about you as impoverished slaves coming out of Egypt at this particular moment, but really it's l'dorot. Really, it's for the generations. It's for and you see that in the very words, in the fact that it's referring to concepts of citizenship that we're not going to see for another couple of decades. Right in the Torah, that there's really a bigger purpose here. There's a purpose of nationhood, of ultimately going to Eretz Israel, going to the land of Israel. There's a broader purpose here to the sacrifice, and it's amazing in that focus is on the nation and on this national project as we leave Egypt, and that's sort of what this korban, what this sacrifice and is supposed to create for us and signify. So we're not going to go too far into it. I am aware of the time, so we're going to briefly, and if anyone wants to read the entire article, or not the entire article, I can send a link to it. But a Rav from Yeshivat Ma'alot, for those who are familiar, had a really interesting, basically saying what everyone here had said so far, which is that looking at and analyzing the relationship between the Brit Milah and the Passover, the Paschal Lamb, and sort of observing something very interesting about them, that these two mitzvot are the only two mitzvot the only two commandments in the entire Torah for which someone who violates them receives the karet, or excommunication punishment, for violating those commandments. Any other commandment in the Torah that has karet to it, whether it's eating chametz on Pesach, as just one example, or whether it's let me try and think of another one real quick, or whether it's eating blood, for example. So these are all things these are all negative, these are all active violations, transgressions that cause excommunication. And yet we have these two very, very specific mitzvot that if we don't do them, in other words, if we passively not fulfill those commandments, we get excommunicated from the people. Whatever that means, we're not going to get into the mystical interpretations of what exactly is excommunication, but it's very interesting. He points out that the two things in the entire Torah that have excommunication that are passive are not getting a Brit Milah, not performing or doing or getting a Brit Milah. And the second one is that of Korban Pesach, is not engaging in the Pesach sacrifice and ceremonies. And one thing he points out, if anyone wants to take the English, I bolded it so it's a little easier to get to. So I want to take the English on the right side. Basically summarizing what is, yeah, please.
Just the bolded part?
Just the bold to the end.
Yeah, Milah, the individual, Milah, the individual enters the people of Israel, and Passover is the national sacrifice of the people of Israel. The circumcision is a covenant with the Almighty. Those who are not circumcised cannot sacrifice the Passover sacrifice. And one who does not sacrifice the Passover sacrifice, and the soul shall be excommunicated from the nation of Israel. He is not a part of the nation of Israel. Not like one who does not take the lulav, which is a great loss. However, this does not remove himself from the people of Israel.
Okay. So there's a lot to unpack in what his article is. I only really bring it to emphasize this one aspect, which is really profound to think about, which is the significance of the Passover Seder, what we're about to engage in, and the Korban Pesach, and linking it to Avraham Avinu and the Milah, the Brit Milah, which is that really this isn't just some tradition seeing the Paschal lamb sort of on the Seder plate, on the table, the Zroa. This isn't just some stump tradition. This is literally us connecting ourselves with the people. That's the purpose of Pesach. That's sort of the underlying objective of the Seder is uniting together through this korban and becoming a people. And that's why one who does not partake in that, one who excludes themselves from those practices, that and Brit Milah, is basically making a statement that they're excommunicating, they're separating themselves from the national project, from that national project. And so it can be discussed whether or not excommunication is a natural consequence of the person's own choices and behaviors, or whether or not it's this prescribed divine mystical thing. But at the very core, there is a really interesting link here between the Brit Milah and Korban Pesach. And one really, I don't know if anyone has any comments on that. Okay, so feel free to interrupt me if you do. Yeah, please.
I was just gonna say really quick, it just seems like that nation here is sort of also defined as sort of action, or at least partaking in some fundamental fundamental formative actions that kind of join you to the nation. Just yeah, that's what.
Amazing. Yeah, no, these are like, I think as also my mother said earlier, you guys I think are both in the same lines. All those Snickers over there, I see them. Along the same lines, very point, which is that these are very significant actions that are binding us to the nation. I think Rabbi Yudrin also pointed out that, that these are very significant tethers to the national narrative, which give them their uniqueness. One other aspect, so we sort of understand, I think we all appreciate the uniqueness of Korban Pesach. Why Milah? Why Brit Milah? And I just wanted to sort of add one other facet to that, which is within this whole story of Egypt, right? Ultimately, God promised us way back in the beginning of Genesis that we were going to go through this whole process. And that was during his covenant. That was one of his covenants with Abraham, was that Bnei Israel are going to go into Egypt and they're going to suffer, and then they're going to come out as a nation and settle the land of Israel. And the Brit Milah is a covenant, is an original covenant between Abraham and God, which sort of started this whole process. So I think I would just offer also that there's sort of a poetic completion to this whole process, in that God told us it was going to happen. He set us on this path. We went through the trials and tribulations of Egypt, and then we came out a nation. And this is sort of God linking the end of the process with the beginning of the process, and sort of showing us that that part's over. Now we're on to the mission. Now we're out in the world, fulfilling the objective that we were originally designated for through that breed. And so there's a certain historical link also to those two specific practices in their national aspects. So I think just
kind of takes us back, Azariah, to the very beginning.
Amazing.
To the sorry, did I steal your thunder?
Please. No, go.
Well, the original point that Mrs. HaCohen made concerning the distinction between Yaakov and Yisrael, there's these two components, the individual and the nation, and these are really coming to fruition here. Maybe that's where you were going, but that kind of stuck out to me.
No, 100%. I definitely connected. 100%. Actually, I was going to take this to the Mishnah. One final source to sort of wrap everything together. But if anyone has anything to say on the previous, anything to expand on wherever you can point out, or give it another second here okay. So without further ado, we're gonna conclude with one final source, which I hope you'll all enjoy. And for those following at home, it's not in the physical packets, but it is in the link. If you scroll to the bottom, we're not going to deal with, at the bottom you'll see I brought some political scientists. I studied poli-sci, full disclosure, in my degree. I studied in Queens College back in the day, before I did law at Hebrew. And I really was very intrigued by the question of who's a nation. And so I just brought a few sources from traditional political science figures about what exactly is a nation to think about and contemplate with respect to our process as a nation here. A lot of them echo what Andrew said and Ariel mentioned before, as well as Dahlia. So you might see some of the things that you said in some of the scholars I brought here. But as our final source for the night, I would like to take us to Mishnah and Pesachim. For those who are familiar, the Mishnah is a Tanaic, from the Tanaic period. It's basically it's tricky to define what exactly it is, but basically it's a corpus of the oral tradition. And this specifically comes at a perek, a chapter in Pesachim, the tractate that deals with Pesach, at length, at a lot of length. This perek specifically deals with the Seder. It deals with the 4 kosot, the four cups of wine. It deals with basically the whole series of the Pesach Seder. So if someone wants to take the final source, again, we're going to do in English. You can focus on the bold here. There's a number of statements that are made about the Passover Seder I encourage you to read, but the bold one. Can someone, anyone bold from that? Noah, thank you.
Yeah, sure. In every generation, a man is obligated to regard himself as though he personally had gone forth from Egypt, because it is said, "And you shall tell your son on that day, saying, it is because of that which the Lord did for me when I came forth out of Egypt."
You can continue. Just take it a few sentences more.
Okay. Therefore, it is our duty to thank, praise, laud, glorify, raise up, beautify, bless, extol, and adore him who made all these miracles for our
Your
fathers
mom
and
can join
ourselves.
too. Your mom can join too.
I'll let her know. Thank you.
Okay.
He brought us forth from slavery into freedom, from sorrow into joy, from mourning into festivity, from darkness into great light, and from servitude into redemption. Let us say before him, hallelujah.
Okay. Okay. So this verse, this passage from the Mishnah is basically discussing the obligations of the Seder, or sort of the objective. I wouldn't say obligation, say also an obligation, but also the objective of the Seder. And most of us those of us who've been through a Seder before know that it can often be a long time before you get to the food. And that is often because we're spending time talking about the story. It's talking about the Exodus, talking about leaving Egypt, talking about our servitude in Egypt. Before we talk about, and then talk about our redemption. And the reason for this, as this Mishnah states, is that there is a generational, sort of eternal obligation for every person to regard themselves as if they had personally gone forth from Egypt, right? As if they've personally left Egypt. Chayav adam lirot et atzmo ki'ilu hu yatsa miMitzrayim. Every single one of us has to envision that we ourselves are leaving Egypt. And then it cites a few verses. And for that reason, we say Hallel at night, which is a rarity. And this is, I think, one of the only times we do it, if not the only time that we say Hallel at night. And the reason for that is because we are literally experiencing that redemption in that moment. And I think to tie it all together with what we were talking about before, what does it mean to see ourselves as if we are leaving Egypt? And this is really the punchline of the entire story as I see it. Is that to see yourself as having come out of Mitzrayim is to see yourself as part of the Jewish nation. And interestingly, notice we haven't even talked about Matan Torah yet. And I think that to be a part of the nation, literally there's sort of what everyone here was sort of describing before. There's this mutual historical bind that we all have to each other, this link, where we all went through this Egypt period. We started off as a family, went through this Egypt period, and before we even got the Torah, we're a nation first. And I think Pesach and the Passover Seder and this experience where everyone's meant to come together, right? We have 4 children who come together, each of varying levels of background and various origin stories. Coming together is really meant to epitomize that leaving Egypt, not just in the sense of we have this matzah which didn't have enough time to bake, but in the sense of we are now becoming a nation. And that's the experience of the Passover Seder, is this unification of our people. And I bless us all, and I hope you bless me back, that this year as we sit around our Sedarim together, in our fewer than 10 or fewer than 2, whatever the regulations may demand, we really think about the people who are part of our nation, the people who we have the privilege of calling a part of our family, of our extended family, and of our nation, and give gratitude to God for that, for taking us out of slavery, for bringing us to the land of Egypt, for bringing us to where we are today, for giving us everything that we have, and really see ourselves as part of a nation and part of that redemption process. So I want to thank you guys for everything that you've contributed to this, and all the chidushim. And I wish everyone a Chag Kasher V'Sameach, and really thank you, Rabbi Yudrin, for putting this together. This is amazing. And Chag Sameach.
Thank you very much, Azariah. It's great to have you back in the Beit Midrash. Really, your energy and love for the stuff is contagious, and so happy to be able to do this. It's been awesome to see all of you guys from all over the world come together and learn together, people from several years ago, people from the Monday Night program, people from the Torah Cafe program, from the Wednesdays from the last semester, and to be able to come together and share together, and Mrs. HaCohen's beautiful additions to the well to the discussion. Hopefully, we can have a chance to see you and have you join us more. We're going to continue this week tomorrow at 8 o'clock Israel time with Hannah Barkadori Damatov. I think that's her new maiden name, or new married name, although it's probably not so new anymore. She was like Azariah, well, she was a student first, and then she came in as a chavruta, whereas Azariah, you were kind of always kind of both mixed all together. But she was a student, then she came back as a chavruta, and she's really, really awesome. And she has a lot to share. So we're looking forward to hearing from her tomorrow. She's going to talk about personal freedom. So right here on this very same link tomorrow at 8 p.m., you can join her. And then on Thursday, Leah Lewis, another amazing success story, who was a student, and then she made Aliyah and became a chavruta and kind of shows up now and again to the program, and a fellow Canadian, who are Canadians here. So she's going to be talking about the secret of the Seder plate on Thursday. That's going to be fantastic. And this, and also the following week after that, on Sunday and Monday, Rabbi Grodner will be also giving the final two shiurim in this series. And then after Pesach, we're going to pick this up. I mean, we're going to ride this out like everybody, and we're going to try to make the best of it. We're going to try to come together and connect. And, just like we do on Monday nights, like we do on Wednesday afternoons, the best way to come together is through sharing these beautiful, powerful ideas about who we are, our identity as individuals, as a nation, as a people. It's awesome to be able to share it with us. And especially now, I find that these learning sessions, even though it's not the same, it's so mitchazek, it's so strengthening to all of us to come together around these ideas and to share and to give chizuk. Even if we don't speak it out specifically, we're sitting together, we're learning, we're giving each other chizuk as we go through this really, really incredibly challenging time for all of us, which we should come through and go to see through the other side. I don't know the answers to all of this, and I question those people that do, but I do think that coming together and strengthening one another and learning together can be a very positive outcome of all this, and bring a positive light to the darkness that we're seeing out there. Anyway, on that note, I wish everyone in Israel, Alayla Tov, everyone in America and other places, a good afternoon. And thank you guys so much. We look forward to seeing you guys very, very soon. Thank you.
Yom Tov. Yashikov.
Thank you.
Yashikov, Azi.
Shikoya,
Happy
Azariah,
Pesach.
thank you.
Shikoya. Bye.
Bye, everyone.
Thanks again, Azariah. Shkoyach.
Anytime.
Amazing.
Thank you, guys. This is awesome.